Respect is something we tried to instill in our children when they were young. It had to be not only taught, but it had to be shown in order to be earned. I had to learn it myself growing up, but I never learned it from my parents. I was 11 years old, and it was a very harsh winter, so my father had his best friend to move into our house for the winter because of the poor road conditions on the country roads. They put my older sister in my bedroom because her bedroom had two twin beds that he and I could use. One night I woke up and heard him and my mom in the other bed doing something. She saw me and told him to shut up, and I lay down and went to sleep. She was right, so I did. The next day I asked her about it. She said it didn't happen, that I must have dreamed it. 2 weeks later I caught them again, but this time in my parents' marital bed. The result of their relationship was my younger sister. My mother, to protect herself, made me the family liar. My father raised my half sister as his own, but to numb the pain, he became addicted to whiskey. I learned quickly and firmly that for most people the truth didn't matter. It mattered to me, and to this day I hate liars. I neither condoned them nor defended them. To many who knew me, it made me look like a complete at times. My only son experienced firsthand that not talking to me was the worst thing he could have done in his life. Talking to his mother turned small problems into big ones. If she got to me before he did, they became emergencies. His mother knew what buttons to push, and it was a tough 2 years for him. But then he opened up to me. He realized that responsibility was a price he had to pay. He turned 16 this year, and he wanted his first car. He was the oldest of 3 kids. My youngest brought home a bad winter cold, which she lovingly passed on to me. So I was awake, suffering coughing fits, switching TV channels, looking for something worth watching, when I discovered a new version of the cameras used by police officers using my cell phone. I texted my friend asking him if there were models that could automatically forward the current video when it became full to a pre-programmed email address. 2 days later, he called and told me about a product that did just that. But it didn't cost as cheap and only worked as intended if you had free Wi-Fi. 3 of these devices ended up costing me over 2,000. I had them deliver them to my office at work, along with a new laptop I had ordered for personal use. The advertising firm I worked for was responsible for supervising all commercial shoots, which meant I was often on remote locations for days at a time. The main shareholders of the firm were identical twin brothers. Their names were Robert and Stephen Walker. Stephen was known as a gambler and had never married. We seemed to get along very well. I had worked for them for many years and was now earning 6 figures, so life was going great for me while I was away. If my wife needed an escort, Robert, who is gay, was the brother who stepped in. It gave him an opportunity to improve his public image. David Peters delivered them to me by showing up at my office on Friday afternoon with a few additional items for me to review. The first thing he said I needed to do was to set up an email address in the cloud to which the videos would be sent. So I created a new account just for that. The cameras were no bigger than a diamond stud. They are all motion activated, so we had one of them embedded in the earrings. They could run for up to a week before requiring recharging, which was done wirelessly. When a signal was detected, all she had to do was remove them and put them back in the box. Each camcorder had its own ID number, and she presented it to everything they sent. He asked me why I needed them. I explained that my intuition was telling me something was wrong, but I didn't know what I wanted to see for myself if my stomach was wrong. Sunday night, I was scheduled to fly out for another trip on Sunday. I presented Deborah, my wife of almost 18 years, with her gift diamond earrings that dangled down from a stud. She loved them and promised to wear them the whole time I was gone. Before heading to the airport, I stopped by the office to pick out a few necessities. This gave me the opportunity to leave a note in both of my boss's offices that I would call them if there was a problem. I installed one camera in each of their offices so that it would give an uninterrupted view of their desk. Both were directly connected to the sources they needed. I flew from New York to Whistler on the west coast of British Columbia because we had a 2 week shoot scheduled for a new skateboard commercial. Fortunately, there was still snow on the upper peaks. I'm not a very large man, only 5 feet 9 inches, 166 pounds with a 32-inch waist. Deborah always says I should wear socks for boys 3 to 9. Her wrist was thicker than mine. We were both the same height, so around me she never wore heels. She had a decent rack, but anything bigger than her mouth was beyond me. With her long blonde hair, she attracted the attention of many men but always blew them away. Our life when I was home slowed down but was still fairly regular, and it seemed that our children took the example of her half of the family, so I had no reason to doubt it. As a precaution, and because we live in the city, we agreed to have our kids' DNA tested. We also fingerprinted them in case anything happened to them. On Wednesdays, while I did karate, she went to the theater, and the rest of the time we spent all of our free time together. On Fridays, we go out to dinner and dance because we both love to dance. Weekends, when possible, we devoted to the kids. Deborah had her own home interior decorating company, which brought her a good income, and she had an answering service when she wasn't home. There were times when we were both loaded with work and were away from home. Both of our parents came to the rescue. As a result, our children developed deep relationships with both of them. On Monday evening, I started going through the information sent to me, sending daily updates on the laptop provided by the company. Then I opened mine and discovered 3 sent messages. The first one that caught my interest was a fight between Stephen and Robert. "I've had enough," said Robert. "Being your muse so you can entertain Deborah is no longer fun. God, if Glenn ever finds out we're screwed. He's doing the work for 3, and without his abilities we'll lose millions. Do you know how many clients we'll lose if he goes to our competitors? You've got to stop this now." "I can't," said Stephen. "I love her, and according to Deborah, there are 3 children are mine." "Jesus Christ, you're an idiot," said Robert. "I'm going to our corporate lawyer to ask him what we should do to protect the firm. If the truth comes out, we're all screwed. Glenn will destroy us all, and he'll have every right to do so." I went to the bathroom to throw up. I called my older cousin Gordon, an expensive divorce attorney, and got him out of bed. Let's just say he wasn't impressed when I told him what I had learned. He told me to send all the videotapes I had received to him, and he would start taking action on his end. The first thing he wanted to arrange was to get a sample of Stephen Walker's DNA. The videotapes themselves couldn't be used, but the transcripts of the conversations could. He asked me to send a copy of my firm's human resources manual to his office. He asked me to find a notary public to fax him a power of attorney. Tomorrow I will get the private investigator we are working with involved in this case. They will find out when, where, and how. It's a good thing you're in Canada. If you're not around, things will be easier because their guard will be down. If all goes well, it would be a good idea to cater to them before you return. I replied that it should be in a little less than 2 weeks, but it could take longer. The next morning, I called my assistant who handled everything I needed during the shoot. I asked her to forward the instructions to my cousin's cutie office. Nora said she would do so and commented, "I guess you finally found out after answering yes." She said she would remain silent for now, but was willing to testify on my behalf if necessary. So management knew all along. I then stopped by the family doctor's office to explain that I needed to send copies of my children's DNA to the lawyers. Since I was drafting a new will, I charged the fee to my credit card. One of the Canadians working with us was able to get a notary. The rest of the week I just sent videos because I knew my cousin would explain everything. The rest of the week, I spent the rest of my free time fighting with myself not to go to the gym and get drunk. I now understood my father's pain. On Friday afternoon, after arranging what I could do over the weekend, I flew to Vancouver by helicopter and then drove all night to New York. After renting a car, I parked it on the next street over from my house. I was surprised to see relatives picking up our three children. Half an hour later, Deborah came out dressed in a brand new dress with high heels that skimmed her body like a silhouette. As soon as she left, I turned off my alarm clock and went into my office to pull out what I called 16 journals. They contain the dates of each trip, what happened, and where I was. Those logs had saved my more than once from a legal standpoint. An hour later, I was at Gordon's house, sitting in his kitchen discussing what he had learned. Adam's sample had been taken from Steve, and we were waiting for the comparative analysis to be completed. They had also discovered the penthouse that the two had owned for 22 years. The neighbors thought they were a civilian couple, and he had proof that they were both there so regularly that the neighbors thought they worked weekends and nights. Twice a week they had a house cleaning company come to their house. He had an affidavit confirming that they were a civil couple. Even before we met, her firm's only client was a limited liability company that sold and bought inexpensive apartment buildings, then remodeled them and sold them to new buyers at inflated prices as furnished apartments. This firm was wholly owned by Stephen Walker. The company's tax records showed that Deborah was making over $500,000 a year after expenses, but was extracting less than $80,000 for herself. My children might not be mine, but were they Stephen's? That remained to be seen. Since Deborah was playing me, had she done the same to Stephen? Gordon told me that my mother would be picking up the kids next weekend. Because I wasn't expected home until at least Monday, we agreed to burn her lover and company when she was in her primary residence, their penthouse. I would take out of the house what I felt she should have. I told him I'd be flying on Friday night. He would cancel all the cards in both names and empty half of our accounts before they were frozen by court order the day I was coming home. I flew back to Canada to finish filming, working twice as hard. Robert Walker met me at the airport as I was getting off the plane Saturday morning. He was surprised that I had finished filming early and was confused because he couldn't understand why our meeting couldn't wait until Monday. I had the company laptop with me. Over a cup of coffee, we discussed the trip and what the editing department needed to do. While we were sitting there, a gentleman approached and asked if he was Robert Walker. Robert confirmed his identity, and the man said, "You have been served." Before you could utter a word, I handed him my laptop, company keys, credit cards, and pulled a letter of resignation out of my jacket. Then I explained that his brother and my wife had also tendered their resignations. His face turned white, and he asked how bad it was going to be. I replied that I was going to ram it down their throats. I have DNA that confirmed Stephen is the biological father of all Deborah's children and mine. The lovers are being serviced in their penthouse right now. Remind them that they are required by court order to stay 500 feet away from my mother, children, and me. I felt like poor Robert was about to lose his last serving. I got up and started to leave. Robert pounced on me in a rage. Before airport security could get to us, he was lying on the floor with blood running down his face. He would no longer be a handsome boy were it not for the large medical expenses. My mom and kids met me as I drove into the house, opening the garage door. It was hard to inform my two daughters and their brother that I was not their biological father. My mom lost her temper when I told them that their mother was now with the man who had become their father in their love shack. I told them that their relationship lasts longer than your mom, and I have been married. For now, you will live with me until the court rules. After you all have been interviewed, the court will look at all three of your parents' relationships with you before making a decision. All three were devastated, and so was I. My mom heard someone trying to unlock the door and went to open it. I said no, that the outside alarm was still on. So I called the police explaining that I wasn't supposed to be home and that someone was trying to break in. They said they were already responding to the silent alarm. That's when I sent the kids upstairs. They managed to get the front door open. Stephen was kicking out a window in the massive metal door, putting his hand through the door and trying to unlock the chain lock when the police showed up. Having apprehended the intruders, the policeman knocked and identified himself. When I opened the door, I saw Stephen and Deborah in handcuffs, sitting in the back of the cruiser. When he said she claimed to live here, I handed him a copy of the restraining order that had been served this morning. He smiled and said, "I guess they're both going to jail until they meet with the judge." My mother finally admitted that what she did to me years ago was wrong. It took her seeing what I was doing to realize the real cost. Not me, but her grandchildren. "I'm no better than Deborah," she said. "Your father forgave me, but he was never the same. If he hadn't died in an industrial accident, I can't say we wouldn't be where you are now." Deborah and Steve's pictures were on the front page of the New York Post on Sunday morning as they were being led to the police station. I told the reporter on the court called the whole picture of what was going on. I stated that I was forced to resign from the firm because of Stephen's long-term relationship with my wife. This will be published in the press on Monday. The DNA comparison report between my children and the Walker brothers proved their parentage. She liked the fact that the president of Walker's adverting violated the moral high ground he had established by interfering in my marriage. It was up to the board of directors to decide the matter. Carl and Carla Matthews, my children, and I shared a late Sunday dinner at a local restaurant, after which they followed us into our home. Their grandmother put my daughters to bed so my father-in-law and I could talk in my home office. Dad said Deborah and Steve's relationship started before I even met Deborah. I found out about their relationship when I was in Canada. I then showed him a video clip of Robert and Steve talking. He shook his head in amazement. It was clear to me that he had no clue about anything. I then showed him the purchase documents for the penthouse, which were 2 years earlier than the date of our marriage. The condo was still registered under her maiden name. "Damn," Carl exclaimed. "The day you got married, you were already in." When I saw that clip, I hired a lawyer and a private investigator. Both said it was easy to get the facts on them because they thought they had protected themselves so well that the truth was impossible to find. I said softly, "I'm not going to let what's going on in my life affect Mom's and your relationship with your children." I handed him my copies of court documents and reference materials. While he read them, I went and poured us both a large shot of Irish whiskey on the rocks. What hurt him the most was reading the conversation in which Deborah frankly admitted to a mutual friend how her parents, sibling, and I had been so easily duped. It was a joint decision between Stephen and her that I would be the one to raise his children. From the first time I met Glenn, I knew he would do anything for me. He was so in love with me that he was willing to believe anything. His love made him so blind that he couldn't see what was right in front of him. Stephen, seeing Glenn's natural ability to notice the smallest details, made him his wand of choice on set. According to Steve, with Glenn's arrival, the cost of reshoots dropped by 80%. As a result, the company's reputation and profits skyrocketed. Glenn thought our home life was good. He never thought anything was wrong, and besides, he's a great father. When Terry, my youngest, graduates from high school, I will file for divorce and get him out of the picture. To do that, I'll use the escort services Stephen's firm provides. They won't even know it's over. It will be very easy to get as much out of him as possible," she said with a laugh. I returned and saw my father-in-law crying. "Where did you get all this from?" asked Carl seriously. I opened my laptop in front of him, went into my email, and opened the latest email from Deborah's cell. I opened the video file and turned on its playback. "Steve, this is frustrating as hell. I don't know how Glenn found out about this," said Deborah. "He claims you're the children's father, but he hasn't shown us proof, so it's still the ramblings of his lawyer trying to build a case. What we're dealing with is just smoke and mirrors, right?" replied Steve. "But Glenn resigned and served Robert on Saturday. Will he be serving corporate tomorrow? If so, that's when things will become clear. We're lucky the judge got off with the warning. Now I have to figure out what to tell the board of directors. I need to get my office clothes and personal belongings out of the house, so I'll be looking for a divorce lawyer tomorrow. Another thing I have to decide is what I'm going to tell my parents. Whatever I say, I have to make it seem like it's Glenn who's cheating, not me, and that you're just a friend helping me out. Do you think they'll buy that? Asked Steve. After all, we both know your kids are mine. They have no reason to doubt me because they've never caught me doing anything, so their faith and trust in me is assured. She replied, If I have any doubts, I will start crying. My tears have always brought them to their senses. After all, I've always been Daddy's little girl. What about our 3 children? Do you want them to take my last name after we get married? Asked Stephen. Upon hearing this, I turned off the video because I almost cried. Deborah's diamond earrings have a camera built into them that charges wirelessly and transmits data over Wi-Fi when full. As long as they're charged and there's a signal, the information will be transmitted as long as she's wearing them, I said. Carla slipped inside and joined us. I offered her a glass of wine, and when she accepted, I left them alone to discuss the situation. I returned just in time to see that Carl had replayed to her the conversation we had overheard. Carla's face spoke for itself. Mom said through tears, So, what the divorce papers say is true. She cheated, but for how long? Longer than their marriage? Dad said, Our grandchildren were created by our daughter and Stephen. I've seen copies of the DNA report. My daughter Deborah is no longer in my eyes. She has turned her back on everything our family has ever stood for. I can't get over it. Because of the length of time and the amount of lies she spun, we can both see that she has no regrets about anything, not even being exposed. Makes me wonder how many times we've taken the kids away so she could be free to have fun with her real lover. But there are grandchildren. Carla cried. I don't want to lose them. Mom, if I get custody of them, you'll always have unlimited access to them. I told Daddy that before we even started talking. I said to assuage her fears. But I suggest you both apply to the court for unlimited access to your grandchildren, regardless of who gets custody. You'll have to sue all 3 of us, but I think it's the wisest thing you can do. That way you can tell Deborah that until this is over, you refuse to take sides. Don't let your emotions make you close doors that can't be opened later. Carl looked at me and nodded in agreement. Honey, our son-in-law Glenn will always be family to me. I think his wisdom on this matter is correct. He is in as much pain as we are, and yet he puts our needs first. Carl said, As far as we know, it seems that she and her lover don't care about their children at all. Our daughter has been lying to us her entire adult life. Where did we go wrong? I want to ask. When Deborah confessed her love for Glenn to us, was she telling the truth? Said Mom. Monday was a busy day for me. I drove my 3 children to school and then spent time in the office explaining the situation. If my wife tried to contact the kids at school, the police would find out. My soon-to-be ex found herself an expensive divorce attorney and my former employer's firm was sued. On Wednesday, my father-in-law filed both Deborah and me. He told me that his daughter was furious and demanded that he withdraw his lawsuit. He told her that she and her mother didn't know what to believe, but felt that their relationship with their grandchildren should be protected. He asked her why she was denied access to the children. She refused to answer. Then he informed her that I had suggested that he make that decision after our family dinner on Sunday night. Now we know why you weren't invited. He made us promise that we would sue all of you because he didn't want our relationship with our grandchildren to suffer because of their parents' behavior. He's the one who gave us the address of your penthouse. That's how we knew where to sue you. According to city records, you are co-owners with Glenn's boss, which gives his claims more credibility. Deborah lost his temper and he hung up. This conversation told him a lot because, as human beings should, when confronted with the truth, most will run away. Fortunately, Friday was the last school day before spring break, so the in-laws, my three kids, my mom, and I went to Disneyland for a week, leaving on Saturday and returning a week later. The trip had been planned weeks ago, but there was no way I could get a discount on Deborah's ticket. Gordon had gotten Deborah and her attorney to agree to sign a deed for her share of the house in lieu of her corporation paying a portion of the house expenses while we were married, and to make her believe that it would not be used as a marital asset in the divorce. She didn't realize that her corporation would be won because she ran it from home and its legal address was our residence. Walker's Human Resources Department accepted the terms of my termination. Thus, until my second vacation days were over, I remained an employee of the company. This gave me until the end of June to figure out what I wanted to do. When I returned from my former assistant, Nora, I learned that the board of directors had given me a chance to cool off before trying to work with me. They realized how valuable an employee I was to the firm and were getting messages from clients about whether or not I would return. Although the Walker brothers owned significant stakes in the corporation, they could both be removed for cause. In addition, the board of directors could force them to sell all of their stock. Therefore, the brothers hired an outside firm to analyze their options and deal with the consequences. Gordon allowed Deborah access to the garage where we moved all of her personal belongings after duplicating all of her corporation's business records, including all bank records. While we were gone, he had a team of forensic accountants analyze all of our children's parenting expenses to date, starting with the date of conception of the oldest. Using a semi-annual interest rate, he divided the cost of each year by 3 and calculated the cost of Steve Walker's involvement in my cuckoldry, doubling it for undue stress and suffering. Then added interest to bring it to present value. The second lawsuit against him was for alienation of affection. I also sued both brothers for interference with the marital relationship. I used the adultery ground against my wife. The kids had just gotten home from school when there was a knock on our front door. It was a social worker checking out a complaint about me not watching the kids. I learned that the call came from my soon-to-be ex's attorney. My son led her into the kitchen where she caught me and my daughters working together to prepare dinner. She smelled a roast cooking in the oven. When she explained why she had come, I told her to rummage through the cabinets, refrigerator, and freezer while I continued peeling potatoes. After complying with the request, I offered her a cup of coffee and pulled out a couple large mugs. "Miss, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name," I said. "This is Tricia Marsh, Mr. James," she replied.